the sword really helps you to understand your Tai Chi principles, because when you hold a sword in your hand, it's so easy to grip it and to really think of it as something that you need to hold. When you do that, you lose all of your Tai Chi principles in your movements. The sword becomes something that's separate from you that you have to hold on to. So when we work on the basics, is to change the relationship of you and your sword. It's not something that you have to grip and hold on to. You start feeling like the sword is actually an extension of your hand, because that's the feeling that we want. When you're holding the sword and moving the sword around, you want to still feel that free flow of that energy all the way out to the tip of the sword. I like to say that the sword tip should feel like it is an extension of your finger all the way out to the tip of the sword. In Tai Chi, we don't make hard fists, right? When we make a fist, the fist is loose. It's a loose fist because a tight fist is a lot of tension. This is basically the same in how you hold a sword. We don't grip the sword. So how do we not drop the sword then? This hilt part, you let it rest right. So you don't even need to really hold it for it to balance there, right? Like it's just basically balancing on its own. So you want to get it right to that point where it rests on top. Your pointer finger and thumb will wrap around, and now you don't really need much for it to be able to stay in your hand. It's not going to drop. You do wrap the other fingers around. The most important is the pinky. The pinky is going to guide. The ring and middle finger almost serve no purpose at all. The pinky is the one that's going to give a little bit of a guide as you move the sword. So you should feel what's active in the hand is the wrist, the pointer finger, the pinky. The thumb is there to just kind of be the hook so that the sword doesn't fall out. Put down the sword. We're just going to take our palm up and we're going to come around using our Tai Chi principles. We wouldn't wave our arms, right? Now turn the palm down and turn. So basically you just want to feel that flow where the hand stays in front of your body, shoulder stays relaxed, and you can feel if you were to direct your mind to where the energy exits your body when you do this, where would the energy leave your body? You should feel it along the pinky edge of your hand. Just kind of direct that feeling in your hand as you make this turn. Do you feel that? When you bring your sword into your hand, you should feel the same thing. All right, and remember, we're not gripping. We're just letting it rest here. You should feel that it's still the pinky edge of the hand where the energy comes out, but now your pinky has become super, super long. There's an extension all the way out to the tip of the sword. The pinky edge of the hand is where you would have the cutting edge of the sword. There are different kinds of swords. This is Jian. Jian is a thin, double-bladed sword with a tip. That's different than a dao. A dao is a one-bladed sword. You will hear the translation to broadsword, the difference between a straight sword and a broadsword. But a dao in Chinese is just any one-bladed edge. So a chef's knife is a dao. Any knife is a dao. A dao has one cutting edge. A jian has two with a sharp tip. Sword can go any which way. Knowing your cutting edge is important. So even though there is this other edge that also can cut, but it's not as strong. So that is the thing with the sword is you have one side that's a powerful cutting edge. You have another side that can also cut, but it's not as powerful. You've got a sharp point that can stab. And just like in our Tai Chi principles where if we have a push, vertical punch, it goes straight, but the power comes from the spiral. Every time we stab forward, just like in Tai Chi, we wouldn't just move our arms. In sword, we wouldn't just move our arms. All power from Tai Chi comes from the ground up, and the power comes from the body. So it's like a screwdriver. I always talk about the power of a screwdriver. The screwdriver, you turn. The screw, though, goes in straight. But the power of turning makes it very powerful to go straight. And the more you can relax, the more powerful that you'll feel. The palm side of the sword can be faced up. You can also turn it over where the palm side of the sword is faced down, right? Because the stab and the thrust, it's utilizing the sharp tip of the sword for that move. So you've got the tip that you can thrust either with palm up or palm down. You've got the edges that you can cut. Sword is all about wrist. These flowers. Many of the movements will include these flowers. And what I want you to feel here is this is letting the sword drop and letting it complete that drop. So if we don't bring it back around, notice how it would be like a pendulum on the down. If you just let it drop and don't do anything, just let it kind of hang there. So notice how when it drops, the motion of the drop makes it go to the side without you doing anything. What we're trying to do is catch the momentum when it's coming over to the side and bringing it back up. We're letting it continue that motion, and what we're going to do is we're going to turn our wrist so that it can go up. So this is why the wrist motion is so important. We're letting it come down, and then we've got to let that wrist turn so that our palm faces out. And then that way the sword can go back up. And then we just kind of guide it. Very little motion in our sword and our arm and our elbow. Let that happen the other way as well. So you gotta keep that elbow relaxed. Keep that curve. The wrist, don't let that wrist come in. So the more flat you can keep that wrist, the better. So you don't want that wrist to kind of bend The more flat you can keep the wrist, the better. First thing is just kind of feeling that momentum of the drop and letting it come up. But just like all of our Tai Chi movements, things don't only happen in the arms. So we need to bring our body into it as well. This one is harder to let it drop down. This way it's easy to let it drop down. This way it's harder. So you have to let it drop down. You have to still let it just drop. Like you've got to feel that it comes down. This side, easier to come down. This side, you also have to let it just drop. Don't control it. Let it drop. Elbow, don't bring the elbow in. The elbows also have to stay out, curved out. So Tai Chi principles, right? We don't bring our elbows in our Tai Chi movements. All the Tai Chi principles stay in place. We have the curve. We need to have the pong, outward expansive energy, space under the armpit. So we keep all of this on the outside, not on the inside. We're going to do let it drop down coming this way. It's like kind of catching the momentum, right? It's almost like when you've got, I don't know, that game with the ball on the paddle, and it's just sometimes you just kind of get into the rhythm because you feel where it's going to go and you're with it. That's what it is you just kind of stay with that momentum, and the more still you can be, the more you can be right under it. Right? The more you start weaving things around, then the more variability you bring to where it's going to come down, and you lose the balance and the center point. There's planes that we want to stay within. If we try to control the movements with our muscles, we can move the sword anywhere we want. But if we stay with the principles of Tai Chi, it's actually very limited to where it can go. And one of the things that we want to start feeling is the plane of the movement. If you imagine 2-dimension and there's a sheet of paper, the sword will be along that sheet of paper. So when it drops down, it would just be along that sheet of paper. So that movement can be very small in the flower. If you don't move your arms at all, then it's like a compass where the hilt is the middle of the compass, right? It will only draw along. So if you imagine like the sheet of the paper is vertical and your sword is like the compass, then it would just go along that sheet. Not here, not here. It wouldn't go like this. It would stay within that sheet. Like if your body were on a plane, the sword would be parallel on a sheet in front of you. And you follow that. So a flower is basically just not moving any part of your arm. But we can move our arm. And that will make a bigger circle and a bigger range of motion. But it still needs to go along that plane. So if we make this a bigger circle, it would make a larger circle still on that plane, right? it would still be a compass. And this is in relation to where you're facing. If we're facing this way, then the 2-dimension is like parallel to this wall. But we might be facing on a diagonal. If we're facing on a diagonal, it's the same concept. If there's a sheet of paper that is along this diagonal where your body is, your sword would be on a plane parallel to you, also on the diagonal. So it would follow still this 2-dimensional circle. Very, very often, the plane of the sword is not correct. That we might be facing the diagonal, but the sword is now coming into this plane that is not parallel to where we are, because we've kind of moved the sword all over the place because we don't know where that sword is supposed to go. And then if you're just moving your arms, you can move it in any position, and often that will wind up being wrong. So if you just always kind of come back to what's the plane that I'm on, and if I'm making a circle, that circle needs to be on the same plane. It's just, parallel to where I am. It might be this way. It might be this way, right? So now we're going to do this where we're going to be on the diagonal. This is going to be on the diagonal plane coming back. And then when we come this way, this is going to be on the diagonal plane going to the side. So the sword's going to come down to our right. The sword's going to come down to our left. But the plane is still on the diagonal. Right, so if you were to just imagine what's the plane of your body, that's where the sword would also be. Right, so my sword's not coming over here. The sword is not coming down over here. It just stays within the same plane. Everything that you feel with the sword in your hand should feel the same with no sword in your hand. That free flow of that energy all the way out. Without a sword, it goes all the way out your hands and fingers. With the sword, all of that is concentrated either in where you're cutting, on the edge of the blade, or in the tip. It's really important to keep the shoulders relaxed. What you should feel should still be mostly in your core. The core takes so much of the force in Tai Chi. The more you can bring the support into the skeletal structure of your body, the less you need muscle. If your muscle exhausts, then you need to compensate for that being really tired. So if you're using your muscles and your muscles are tired, you wind up holding more tension because you're using tension. The more you can get everything to go into the skeletal structure. Like, so if you hold that sword out in front, if we just bring that sword forward here, it is not my muscles holding this up. Like, I'm allowing everything to settle into my skeletal structure. Just like in Jian standing tree pose, I'm not using my muscles to hold my arms in place, right? I'm using the skeletal structure to allow that force to be distributed throughout my whole body. You should be able to stand in Zhuang for a very, very long time. You should be able to hold this sword out also for very, so if you can't, it's not in your skeletal structure. You don't have that alignment of letting that weight get distributed into your skeletal structure. If it's distributed in your skeletal structure, you don't need to grip because you're not using your muscles. When you're in your skeletal structure, then you just continue to let that move with the skeletal structure, and then you don't need to grip it so much because the skeletal structure holds that weight.